On today's Pedone My Take, I'll be joined by former NBA agent Matt Babcock of Babcock Hoops. We're also going to celebrate the start of the NBA playoffs and Browns training camp. I'm going to get mad about the Big Ten and give you my takes all around the world of sports. So let's do it. But first, Pedone My Take is presented to you by my good friends over at BigPlay.com. If you haven't followed Big Play yet, I don't know what you're doing. Check out great shows like In the Backfield with Peyton Hillis and Keith Migra, as well as the good old Big Play Reflog show with Chris McNeil, Reflog_18. We got live sports talk for you guys all day, all the time. It's BigPlay.com. Make sure to go check them out. So, we haven't talked since 2 weeks ago. Last week, I'm sitting on the beach, and I get the breaking news. The Big Ten has canceled their football season. Big Ten is canceled, which pretty much means for the people that live in the great state of Ohio that football in general is canceled with no Ohio State football, no Buckeyes in 2020. So I'm going to take it a step further and say that the fall is canceled. No fall this year. We could call it autumn. We could try again at Christmas, around my birthday, to try again. Let me paint you guys a picture. You wake up on a Saturday morning. The leaves are turning. Maybe even a little bit of them on the ground. You could rake them up. You choose not to. It looks great. Picturesque. There's a cool breeze running through your hair. You're wearing one of those hoodies without a hood. I think they're called crew neck sweatshirts. You have a chai tea from either Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks in your hand. Your dog is running around in the leaves in the yard. Maybe you take him for a walk. Maybe you hop in to turn on college football game day. like many of us would. Not this year. College football is canceled, and thus the fall is canceled. There's so many guys out there this fall that are going to lead the league in apple picking. Nobody wants to do that. What are we going to do? Like, so many people say, oh, I don't know why people get so worked up about it. It's just sports. Life is still going on. We're recovering from this thing. It's just sports. It's unsafe to go back. It's not just sports. This is what a lot of people look forward to. And I just wanted to say, and I want to get into the Sir Yacht stuff later in the show, and everything with him saying that he thinks the Big Ten is coming back. He has a concrete source that the Big Ten is going to be back. We'll get into that in a second. But first, I wanted to get into the fact that Commissioner Warren really botched this up in my eyes. It's another instance of a person in power making a very important decision, but too quickly just pressing the Corona panic button. It's a button that has been pressed a lot over the last few months. When something goes wrong, Corona panic button, Corona panic button, canceled, everything's canceled, Corona panic button. Why not just wait it out? And I know they're trying, maybe move it in the spring. Well, what is the spring, and who is to say that anything in terms of this global pandemic is going to be different come the springtime? Because we said it was going to be 2 weeks, and then it turned into until we flatten the curve, and this global pandemic is still ongoing. So who's to say that it's going to be different in the spring? And then you're going to go an entire fall with, no or limited workouts. To the spring, the contact injuries are going to be incredible, and then you lose out on your top talent. I know Justin Fields and those guys in the Big Ten, the big name people, are, making a lot of noise, saying they want to play. Give us a season. I'll tell you this. If the season's in the spring, their season will be preparing for the NFL draft. And a reason because of this is amateurism is a joke. It is. It always has been a joke. And the NCAA leans on that term amateurism so much. This time it finally came back and bit them. And it bit the Big Ten and it bit Kevin Warren right where the sun don't shine. Because let me tell you, folks, there's nothing amateur about Justin Fields. And there's nothing amateur about Chase Young last year. There was nothing amateur about Dwayne Haskins the year before. These guys aren't amateurs. They're semi-professional athletes that happen to be young men that attend universities to prepare themselves to take the next step to play professional football. If you play at Ohio State, it's at least in the back of your mind that at some point within the next few years, there's a pretty darn good possibility that I could be playing in the National Football League and making a heck of a lot of money doing so. So amateurism to me is a term that the NCAA uses to just avoid playing their players. But if they weren't amateurs and if they were treated like the employees that they are, because we haven't even got into the fact, look at the revenue, look at all the money that these kids are bringing into the school. You won't see this fall because fall is canceled, and so is the Big Ten. You ever see those big drone shots from above Ohio Stadium where you see it just packed with people wearing red and everybody's jumping up and down when the Buckeyes run out of the tunnel? Guess what? Every person in that packed stadium paid for a ticket. You know what else they paid for? A licensed red Ohio State shirt. Right? They pay probably $30, $40. If they have a jersey, possibly more for a shirt. That's all going into the NCAA, into the university's pockets, and these kids aren't really seeing a lick of that money. So are they really amateurs or are they semi-professionals? Because I lean towards the fact in saying that they're semi-professionals. And I know it gets murky because you look at the NCAA as a whole, and it's like, okay, well, what about the MAC, Nick? Like, the MAC is canceled as well. How do you justify paying kids in the MAC when most of those schools run at a loss? Well, that's a different story because we're not talking about the MAC. We're talking about the Big Ten, which is one of the NCAA's biggest moneymakers. And now there will be not only without football, but without fall sports in general, which is going to be huge. A huge loss for these universities, a huge loss for these kids that are trying to get out there and make a name for themselves. So if you pay them like you should, in my mind, and let them make their own decisions on whether they want to play or not, then it works exactly like the NFL. And mind you, the NFL is working relatively well right now. As of 8:09 on Wednesday, August 19th, the NFL is functioning okay. They had their guys that opted out. The opt-out deadline came and went. And now training camp is kind of moving on as it normally does. Sure, there's no spectators there on the sides to watch, But the NFL is doing fine. So why can't college football find a way like, oh, the players that don't want to play can just opt out, and then it's safe for everybody because you agree to play for a contract. Oh wait, there's no contract. No, all you get is that pesky scholarship and not a cut of any of those ticket sales, any of those jersey revenue, any of the merch. We haven't even talked about the concessions that they sell in the stadium. No contract for that. Sorry about it. No season either. It grinds my gears so bad because it's so preventable, and it's an outcome of what everybody has been complaining about for how many years in the whole should athletes get paid debate, right? I feel like when you're in a high school English class and the teacher has you write an argumentative essay, probably about 25 to 40% of the class will write why NCAA players should get paid or why NCAA players shouldn't get paid. And I brought up almost all of the points right here in this first segment. And I know a lot of you guys want me to get into Matt Babcock, former NBA agent, get you guys ready here for the NBA draft lottery. We're going to get into that in just a second. But in my eyes, maybe the NCAA needed this. Maybe they need a year, dare I say 2 years of a break to get their stuff together and come back with a new plan where their employees are actually treated like employees and not like unpaid, I don't even know what. Yeah, you can't really call them interns. They're just unpaid workers at this point for the NCAA. And I feel like if you give these guys a check, even a small check, maybe it's even letting them license their own name, their own image, their own likeness for their own jersey sales. And maybe that's the way that you do it. So that way they're not amateurs anymore. And that way you can give the guys the option whether or not they want to opt in or opt out. I hope that makes a whole lot of sense to everybody. You could go ahead and follow me on Twitter. Tweet the show at Pedone My Take. My own Twitter at Nick Pedone 12 as well. So with the NBA draft lottery being tomorrow, the act you've all been waiting for, I know why everybody clicked on this link here. Let's head to our featured interview of the week. He's a former NBA agent who knows the landscape of the NBA as good, if not better, than anybody else. He works now as an NBA draft analyst for Babcock Hoops, where he interviews some of the world's youngest and brightest stars. He's got basketball in his blood as he's related to the VP of player personnel for the Milwaukee Bucks, who helped draft Giannis Antetokounmpo up there in Wisconsin. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Matt Babcock joins Pedone My Take. Okay, so joining me now is former NBA agent and current NBA draft analyst, Matt Babcock. Matt, how are you? And thanks for joining the Big Play Show.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So I wanted to first talk about, your life as an NBA agent. Free agency, contracts, trades. It's a huge part of what the NBA is now. What is that off-season period like for an agent?
It's going to be a lot different this summer, obviously. But, when I was an agent, I worked on that side of the business for 10 years. And really just depended on who you're representing and where they're at. I mean, if you had a big free agent, it made things pretty busy, pretty stressful. Obviously, if guys are, trade market, if you've got rookies, it really just depends. I mean, there's so many different layers of that business, and your job sort of changes from day to day.
So now that you no longer represent some players, you do a lot of fantastic work in preparing NBA fans for the draft on your website and with your writing. But you can't have the draft without lottery. What do you make of systems with the NFLs, and do you think that the NBA efforts to stop tanking is really working here?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an ongoing conversation, right? They've tried to do different things to tweak it over the years. I'm not sure what the answer is. I mean, it doesn't seem perfect, but I'm not sure there is a perfect answer. I am happy that they're actually going to have the lottery after all these months. I mean, we've been sitting around, doing all these simulated mock drafts and all that. And so I'm looking forward to Thursday and actually getting the finalized order.
So as an agent of an upcoming draft candidate, a guy that was in college or maybe that was even overseas professionally, what do you do to make sure your client in front of teams? And do you think the pandemic changes the way that teams could approach this upcoming draft here?
Yeah, no, in most years, I mean, it's probably the busiest an agent will be is managing a pre-draft for a rookie. just gathering information from teams, promoting your client, scheduling their workouts and visits. There's really, I mean, if a good agent, does it properly, I mean, there's a lot of time and effort and, strategy put into organizing a guy's schedule, properly. This off season, this pre-draft process has been, obviously very, very different. And, I've talked to a lot of agents that are friends of mine, and everybody's frustrated. Everybody's having to pay for training and housing, extra months with little exposure. I mean, they're not setting up individual workouts. We're hoping there'll be a combine. Pretty much now, it's simply just talking to teams, gathering some information, and setting up Zoom calls. So I mean, it's a long process without much to do, honestly.
So as somebody that's kind of worked on both sides of it, does some of the work that goes in as an agent have to do with putting these guys on, so-called media tours? I want to talk about LaMelo Ball in a second, but I have a deep sinking suspicion that, in the coming weeks, coming months, we're going to see a lot of like LaMelo Ball on, say, First Take or on different radio stations. Does that have to do with some of the preparation for these prospects?
Sometimes, I mean, again, it goes back to who are you representing, and I think the plan needs to be different for each client. Different clients have different needs, and certain players, you need to emphasize exposure, and so you definitely need to take a look at that for certain guys. Other guys, you may want to hide him a little bit. Maybe he's not as well spoken, or it really just depends on the player, and the strategic approach that changes from player to player.
So we talked a little bit about the lottery system too and the NBA efforts. It's obviously an ongoing conversation. Some people out there still think that the system is rigged and that the NBA doesn't give, the cities that they want the best picks. Is that nuts? And do some agents maybe feel the same way?
Yeah, I talk years. I don't think it's reality. Obviously, you have years where like the Knicks get the number one pick and take Patrick Ewing. So I mean, this isn't anything new. That dialogue has been out there for a while. There hasn't been any real evidence that's the case. In regards to the tanking, I mean, that's definitely something we don't need in professional sports. I mean, I want to see guys competing day in and day out. So I mean, anything they could do to correct that, to make sure every game is competitive, would be good for everybody.
So speaking of kind of correcting things, in the mock draft on your site, you only had one upperclassman being drafted in the first round. Speaking of things that get talked about all the time, do you think the NBA might eventually get away with the one done?
Well, I think what things going with what they're doing with the G League, and hopefully all 30 teams will have their own G League team soon. I'd like to see them go, kind of tiptoe to more of, what baseball does, is having almost like a farm system. In that case, you could have it where, a player that's 18 years old is drafted under contract with the NBA team, and you have his rights. But he doesn't necessarily have to play in the NBA. Because that's one of the big arguments is, okay, you need to give these young players an opportunity. If they've got a market to get drafted, they shouldn't be stopped from pursuing those opportunities. But at the same time, we got to protect the game too. And the players in the league office are essentially partners. And, having a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds on these teams, it isn't good for the game. I mean, these guys naturally just are a little bit more immature. They haven't had as much coaching. They're not physically developed. So, I mean, I think something like that would be a nice happy medium where, you're not blocking young guys from getting paid, but you're giving them a developmental system without them, being on an NBA roster.
Yeah, I like that too. And you see that all the time. Obviously, this podcast is based in Cleveland. With teams that struggle, they really utilize the two-way contract in the sense that, if some people go down, you have guys on two-way deals that could bounce up to Cleveland from Canton and back down to Canton. So I definitely agree. I like that as well. So in this upcoming draft, in my opinion, it lacks a little bit of that superstar caliber next level. There's no clear-cut Zion. There's no clear-cut Ja. Is there a clear top guy or a few top guys to you that stand out in your mind?
Well, you're right. I mean, there's not a star-heavy draft. I mean, there's a handful of guys that I really like. I mean, James Wiseman, Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, Obi Toppin, a couple other guys. They're all pretty close in my mind in regards to like their value and their upside. And that's why this year's draft lottery is so important, at least for what we're doing. Just knowing where teams are picking, because I think different teams will have different priority orders, and so one team's big board might be completely opposite than the next. And so, I mean, we might have a guy, depending on how the draft order shakes out, could be a number 1 pick or it could be the 5th pick or 6th pick. And so a lot of parity towards the top, but I do like some of these players.
For sure. So the guy that I'm obsessed with in this is LaMelo Ball, right? And there's so much craziness around him with his dad, with the no college experience, the outspokenness of it all as well. What do you make of him and his situation as a former agent?
Well, he's actually sometimes, on one side, I see why everybody's so excited about him. He's 6'6", 6'7". He's got the ball on a string and just a knack to make plays. He's got some star qualities, right? But there's some concerns on the court too. I mean, his body's not very good. He's not very athletic. Defensively, he may be a little bit of a liability. And then his decision making on the offensive end, he plays a lot of hero ball, taking crazy shots and tries to make the fancy play rather than just the easy right play. And then off the court, all the stuff that we've seen with the Ball family. I mean, the dad can be a distraction, and and I think some of the theatrics that LeVar has done is not my biggest concern, but the entitlement that he's instilled into his kids, that concerns me a bit with LaMelo. Is he have what it takes to really get over the top? Because he does have some tendencies of being somewhat of a spoiled kid.
Do you think teams take that into account? Obviously, the theatrics, they try to hush out as much as they can. We hear general managers and coaches say that all the time from LeVar. But do you think that in the back of some of these GMs and executives' mind, it's there that this kid could have the potential to be explosive and this situation could just blow up in our face at any given time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a team would not take LaMelo because of the dad and all the theatrics. But I mean, it is something that needs to be part of the equation. It's definitely a negative. I don't think it's a negative enough where a team passes on him, but it doesn't. All that stuff does not help him.
Okay, cool. So obviously, I got to ask you about my Cavs. They're in a super odd position where their young core is comprised of mostly guards in a draft that is also comprised of mostly guards all up at top. Matt, where the hell does my team go from here?
It's been a different. I was in Cleveland last week, and I've struggled with the Cavs pick on our mock draft all year. Because like you said, they've used 2 high lottery picks the last 2 years with Garland and Sexton. I like both those players. I think they're both very quality guys. And then the 2 highest upside guys in this draft are Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball. They really don't fit what the Cavs have, and the Cavs are in a unique spot where they've got some big contracts with veterans in youth. And so they're kind of in this limbo of like, hey, are we trying to win now? Are we full development mode? Who are we building around? So I really think they could go in a number of different ways, and I'm really not sure what to make of it. I would say if they end up in the top few picks, it would be hard to pass on Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball. So Cavs are definitely a wild card pick for us.
Okay, that's fair. So many people complain to me when I get high on the Cavs that they have so many guards. You can't get LaMelo or Edwards because they have Colin, they have Darius, Matthew Dellavedova, the backup is still under contract as well. But we also have a lot of the cap space tied to the bigs here. Obviously, Kevin Love has a big payday. Andre Drummond is opting into that gigantic contract. Larry Nance Jr., who has traded LeBron, Tristan wants to come back. Actor James Wiseman or Okoro or any of them, I don't really know where they fit. What is another kind of 4 to 7 range of players that Cavs fans can look at if the ping pongs don't exactly fall their way?
Yeah, I mean, I think they could go with a big, just because Kevin Love's under contract, which I mean, good luck trying to move him with 3 years left on his deal after this season. With Drummond, he's opting in. That's a 1-year deal. I mean, he'd be easy to trade on an expiring contract. So I mean, I think you could take a guy, and the way I look at it with draft picks in most cases is it's not about what you're getting next year. It's like, hey, how's this guy going to be fit in with what we're doing the next 2, 3, 4 years? So you can take a guy like James Wiseman or Onyeka Okongwu or Denny Avdia, Obi Toppin, and it may not be a perfect fit next year, but I mean, over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, you can start shaping your core unit of young guys that are developing to make it work. And so if I were the Cavs and you're outside of the Edwards Ball kind of conversation, I think plugging in a 3, 4, or 5 would make a lot of sense.
Okay, that's fair. Kevin Love here has showed a lot of unhappiness, and I know you said good luck trying to move that contract because as much unhappiness as he's showed, his play hasn't exactly backed that up. What do you think the Cavs organization can do? And do you think they could maybe package a young player, pick Love, kind of get rid of the on-court, drama? And as an agent, what do you do when a guy is that upset in his situation, but the team seems so bullheaded in moving him?
Well, I mean, it's a multi-part question, obviously, but so the first one would be, okay, if I were representing Kevin Love, and what I think Jeff Schwartz, his agent, did is when he threw that temper tantrum on the court and all that, I think that was strategically done. I think he was trying to get traded. I don't know that for sure, but just on the outside looking on in, that seems about right. Like, hey, how do we get a guy traded? Is you become a pain in the ass. I mean, from the agent standpoint, players. I mean, it kind of seemed like push came to shove, and he needed to show the world he did not want to be there. And so. It sounds a little distasteful, but sometimes you have to do it to get things moving, right? Which it didn't work because he's got that big contract, and they didn't want to just dump him for nothing, right? So yeah, it's a tough situation, and with Cleveland, I would be very hesitant to package valuable assets just to get rid of him, because I mean he still is productive, even though he's highly overpaid at this point. He's still a serviceable big. And I don't see them being in a situation where clearing out cap room makes a ton of sense. I think they're a developing team that can probably build through the draft. Cleveland isn't a huge free agency destination anyway. So I would probably stick to my guns with Kevin and just ride that out until you get to a point where you are able to trade him for something that is reasonable.
So we also have to talk about a team that also made Kevin Love rather unhappy, and the Golden State Warriors. They have tremendous odds to win it. They're obviously super stacked still. Steph, Clay, Draymond, despite an off year with some injuries. What do you think they're looking to do here? And if you're a Golden State Warriors fan, is there necessarily a bad pick since they're already just so good?
Well, it's in the league, so I mean they've got the highest probability of getting the number one pick. There's been a lot of talk of could they go with LaMelo Ball? Could they go with Anthony Edwards? I would be hesitant to do that if I were them. They've had so much success with Steph and Clay and Draymond. And Steph, although he's penciled in as the point guard, how it usually works is he initiates the offense. It ends up in Draymond's hands. Draymond's essentially the point forward of the team. And the problem with LaMelo, if you bring him into the mix, use him as a number one pick, number two pick, there's gonna be a lot of pressure playing him a lot of minutes, and obviously with his circle, there's gonna be high expectations as well. So now all of a sudden you're having to move Steph over to the 2, Clay to the 3. You're taking Draymond out of his offensive role of having the ball in his hands. You're changing the complete dynamics of that team. And then on the defensive end, your backcourt is vulnerable with LaMelo and Steph. I would be afraid of that. And the same conversation is pretty similar with Anthony Edwards. I would like to see them go with a big. I think James Wiseman would be a great fit there. I think Onyeka Okongwu. If they wanted to go a little bit more small ball, Obi Toppin would be a good fit. And even Denny Avdia. And so, I mean, the guards, kind of what we're talking about with Cleveland, I would be hesitant to take one of those guards. I just don't know if it makes.
Man, this has got me so excited for it. One of my favorite parts about the draft is the trades. So you get the goofy encounters where the guy is literally off to the side of the stage doing his interview, and he has to do the awkward hat exchange. It's so weird. It's so cringy. As an agent, is that a really scary phone call to make when you find out that your guy's been traded?
So, I mean, the draft it's just like a circus. I mean, there's so many moving parts. There's a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes. You really, you want to do everything you can to have control, but the reality of it is you have no control. There's so much going on. There's so many trades that happen. There's so many trades that almost happen. And so, it's an exciting night from all angles. I mean, as an agent, as a player, front office, and then even the media, I love draft night. That's like Christmas Day for me.
Definitely. So you've put out some outstanding content. My last question for you here before we get you out of here, because I'm happy that you left the agent life behind you. And it's now your Christmas Day, so you could write up some awesome stuff. Where can people go find your stuff, go find you, and what makes you different from some of the other Twitter GMs that people might see around here?
Well, you find us on our site, babcockhoops.com, and then on Twitter, I'm at MattBabcock11 and then at BabcockHoops. And so what makes us different is, it's myself, and then I've assembled a team of a bunch of guys that have experience in basketball, former NBA scouts, Fran Fraschilla is a senior advisor for me. And so the idea is that, it's not necessarily we're doing anything different than everybody else. It's just that we all have experience. We've been in the trenches from different angles. And so it's experienced basketball people, covering the draft and among other basketball content. But I think that's the selling point of just, hey, we've been on the other side of things and seen how things actually work. And we're kind of using our experience and our knowledge to kind of take a stab at draft coverage here.
Well, hey, I appreciate it. Everybody make sure, go give him a follow. Matt Babcock, I appreciate the time, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Outstanding stuff there from former NBA agent and current NBA draft analyst, Matt Babcock. Thank him so much for joining the show. Everybody go check him out on Twitter at MattBabcock11. He gave us some awesome nuggets in that interview, including a little snippet that I liked there in the middle about possibly the Kevin Love stuff being a little orchestrated. I'm super excited for tomorrow night's draft lottery. Obviously, it's a huge deal, but it's so hard. I was thinking about how I wanted to talk about this today because obviously the lottery's tomorrow. It's a big deal, especially here in Cleveland with the Cavs. But how do you really talk about that? Because all you're relying on is an empty room full of ping pong balls, former players, executives, in order to change the scope of your franchise. So honestly, all I have to say about that is fingers crossed, Cavs. We need some good luck in that lottery. I've said it on this show before, the worst team in the NBA last year. The Warriors were just one off because of the injuries. But huge shout out Matt Babcock from Babcock Hoops for coming on the show, getting me pumped up. Let's talk about Kevin Love, and let's talk about what he said in that interview in saying that he thought some of that on-the-court drama this season with Colin Sexton and stuff like that was a bit orchestrated and a bit planned out in an attempt to just be a nuisance and, demand a trade. I think he's on base there, and, we know that Kevin Love did want out early last season. Here's where I'm at with Kevin Love. If he's all in 100% and he's willing to work with Colin, Darius, and this incoming rookie, he's willing to work with Kevin Porter Jr., he's willing to play alongside Andre Drummond and possibly a returning Tristan Thompson, like what I mentioned in that interview, then I'm good. You could stay. But Kevin Love, you're no longer the top guy. Even though you're paid like the top guy, you're no longer the top guy. And Kevin Love is a player that's frustrated me over the years, and I've been extremely vocal about that on Twitter, but I think he does add value to a team. He does a tremendous job spacing the floor. We know that. He's a great shooter, and he's a 10-10 guy at minimum a night, every night, which is valuable. And I think a team, especially a playoff contender, and a team that wants to shake things up and make a little bit of a splash, would certainly be interested in a Kevin Love type player via trade. So I'm at the point where whatever the Cavs decide to do, you need to win the Kevin Love trade. When you look at the scope of the Cavs rebuild, and a lot of it is going to have to be rebuilding through the draft, like Matt said, Cleveland is not the biggest free agent destination. We've seen that. Obviously, the Browns, it might be a little bit easier because, it's a Browns town, and you have that gratification of being part of the team that possibly turns the Browns franchise around and turns the dreaded years around and makes good name for the Cleveland Browns in the city of Cleveland and throughout the rest of America. The Browns are a little bit more of a free agent hub, whereas the Cavs, not so much, especially with, their track record over the years of teams that do not have LeBron James on the roster. You got to build through the draft. But then you also got to build through trades, teams that are like this. Look at what the Indiana Pacers have done with bringing in Victor Oladipo via trade, with bringing in TJ Warren. Those guys have been valuable pieces, and they're in the playoffs right now in Indiana. That ain't free agent Hollywood. That's not free agent New York. That's not free agent Miami. It's Indiana, Indianapolis, which I'm sure is a great place. I've never visited it, but, why can't that be us? Why not Cleveland? So I think the Cavs need to just take this Kevin Love trade and absolutely blow it out of the park. But to me, there's no trading Kevin Love to, say, the Los Angeles Clippers or the Milwaukee Bucks or the Toronto Raptors, a team that's going to finish or Boston Celtics, a team that's going to finish year in and year out within the top 2 or 3 in their conference. That's bad, because all you're going to get out of that is their crappy end of first round draft picks for a year, and then the following year, will be heavily protected. And then ultimately you're not going to get anything in that. In my eyes, you need a package of those later draft picks, preferably in the middle or lottery, but I don't think you're going to get that. Preferably middle to late draft picks, a package of that with 2 to 3 serviceable young role players that fit. I'm at the point where the Cavs need to start focusing on the fit of their basketball team. And obviously they weren't at that point last year, going into last year's draft, when they picked up Darius Garland to pair next to Colin Sexton. And obviously they thought that would work. They thought they'd have a CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard type situation where those two undersized type guards could coexist. But last year we saw when Darius and Colin were on the floor together, it wasn't the prettiest thing in the world. They could have struck gold with the Kevin Porter Jr., the drafting of him. That was huge. But then you look at the fit, you got 4 bigs that need minutes and that need the ball. Larry Nance Jr., Tristan Thompson, Kevin Love, and Andre Drummond when that Drummond trade happened. You got rid of Jordan Clarkson, in my opinion, entirely too soon. And people rag on me all the time for that. Oh, it's just Jordan Clarkson. Who cares? Just Jordan Clarkson. Well, Jordan Clarkson's not a competitor right now, and he's contributing. And all you got in return is Dante Exum and probably some second-round pick that's in 8th grade right now. So, in my opinion, it's now time to start focusing on fit. And the biggest question mark to me for this Cavaliers team is what's going on at small forward. Is it Kevin Porter Jr.? Because really he's a 2. It's probably not Jetty Osman. The team needs a small forward that can play with 2 undersized guards and that can be a scoring option. To me, other than Colin, where's the scoring come from on this team? We hope that Garland can turn into a 3-point shooter, and we know that Love can contribute sometimes. Drummond's going to rebound and score inside. But to me, you need a guy that can do it all. You never filled the LeBron James void at all, at any extent. You filled the LeBron James void with Jetty Osman, which we were optimistic for at the time. We were like, well, hopefully Jetty could develop into a Manu Ginobili type player, 2-way guy. Definitely not the best guy on your team by any means, but a serviceable guy. I don't think he's there yet. And I don't know if he'll ever be there. I think he's a guy that is valuable to your team, but definitely coming in deep off your bench and maybe not even play in the playoffs. That's where I'm at with the Cavs. I need a really good package of a mid to late draft pick, as well as 2 or 3 young, good, versatile players that fit now, that are ready to go now. Because I know Dan Gilbert and Kobe Altman are done playing these games of tanking. They're ready to go. Like, once these fans get back, they're ready to have the new slogan t-shirts draped over the chairs for NBA playoff games. They're ready to go. It's time to start, focusing on maybe making some noise here. So in other hoop news, the NBA playoffs are here. They're finally back. And I definitely have a few takes about that. First take, I don't think the Los Angeles Clippers are very good. I don't think they're all cracked up to be. And I was joking on Twitter that I hope they lose this series with the Dallas Mavericks solely because I hate that Bumble jersey patch. It's so cringy. I don't know why I know Bumble is paying them probably a Brinks truck and more to have that patch on there. But to me, something rubs me the wrong way about it. If you find out what it is, tweet the show at NickPedone12, at Pedone My Take. Something about it just makes my skin crawl. It's really cringy. But the other night, it took a Kristaps Porzingis ejection, which was completely bogus. And I'm not going to debate whether or not that was the right call, because it was obviously the wrong call. I think everybody's saying that. Kristaps Porzingis should not have been ejected. He was just showing emotion. End of story. So it took a Kristaps Porzingis ejection for the LA Clippers, who some people think are the threat to knock off LeBron James and the Lakers heading into this playoffs. I don't know. I don't see it. And I think it's interesting that, to me, Paul George, other than his Indiana days and before that freak injury, isn't a 1 player. He's a 1A type of guy to me. I don't know if Paul George, and don't get me wrong, Paul George is really good. I crap on him all the time, and I call him role player Paul. Everybody likes the playoff P jokes. He's really good. Nobody's debating that. But what I'm debating is Paul George is the best player on your team would be a nightmare. And I'm not sure Paul George at this stage in his career is a guy that the Los Angeles Clippers can count on for a 48-minute basketball game in the playoffs, a best-of-7 series, to win a championship. Can you win a championship with Paul George? I'm not sure at this point. Tweet the show at Pedone My Take. Tweet at me at NickPedone12. He's really good. He's fantastic. He's a scoring machine, and he's a very underrated defender. But at times, I find him just standing in the corner and letting everyone else do the work. And I understand the Clippers are a team like that. They got a lot of mouths to feed. You got Pat Bev. You got Lou Will. Guys that everybody like. Obviously, Kawhi, Reggie Jackson. Dudes that are ball-dominant scoring guys. And then you got Paul George, who's also really good. Had it not been for that injury, he's probably a top 5 player in this league. But at times, I find Paul George just camping out in the corner, waiting for his time. I'm not sure I like that. I'm not sure a championship team needs the guy that's supposed to be their second option being their 5th option, because at times he's just standing in the corner. Grinds my gears, drives me crazy. I don't think the LA Clippers are as good as they're cracked up to be. They're obviously going to make a deep run. I don't think Dallas has what it takes to beat them. But man, when you start talking about the actual NBA championship picture, in this bubble, anything can happen. It's all about momentum. But from what I saw in Game 1, man, it's not going to be the Clippers. I don't think Kawhi is going to, go back-to-back in 2 cities and hoist that Larry again. I just can't see it. Another take that I had about this playoffs is they need a little bit of a Cinderella story. Maybe it's just me being a little bit of a softie on the inside, especially when it comes to sports. If you don't know much about me, follow me on Twitter first, at NickPedone12. I'm a writer by trade. I love sports writing. I love reading sports writing. I love sports storytelling and the weird, nuancy stories that blend themselves within the world of sport and within the lines of competition that we love. It's so neat. Always, every athlete that steps foot on the floor, every coach, even officials, fans, they all have their own individual stories, and that's what makes sport so interesting to me. But this NBA playoffs doesn't have like that much of a storyline, and we missed out on Cinderella stories in March Madness. All right, the bubble needs a Cinderella, and I thought it was going to be the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns were America's team. How do you go undefeated in the bubble? Wasn't that the point of the bubble, was to give these outside teams a shot at the playoffs? And the Phoenix Suns go undefeated, and they're already back in Arizona right now walking their dogs at home. Come on, man. The bubble was flawed, and it was really set up for Zion, and he completely crapped the bed. The Phoenix Suns were the Cinderella. They were America's team. Maybe it could be Dallas. They played the Clippers well. Maybe Orlando can beat the Bucks. It would be awesome. And obviously Orlando took game 1 the other day. It would be awesome to see the Orlando Magic, to me personally, just make noise in this bubble, because they're such a team that's been stuck in basketball purgatory, stuck in the middle for how long? Imagine if they were good in like their own home court, because it's Orlando, it's Disney. They have all the magic of Mizzard Wiki just manifesting within them. I think it's meant to be. And the obvious one here is Portland and Dame, but I don't even know if we can consider Portland and Dame a Cinderella story, just because, dude, their team has been a wreck up until this point. Dame was hurt. CJ was hurt for times throughout the season. Nurkic was hurt throughout the whole season. They didn't sign Carmelo Anthony until way too late. Imagine if they had Carmelo from the beginning, who's played phenomenally well for them. You know, they were relying on all types of role players at the beginning of the season. That's how they found themselves way at the bottom. I don't consider Portland a traditional 8 seed, so I don't know. I don't know if we can consider them a Cinderella story. I was going to fill out a bracket, but that's kind of boring. Quickly, I do want to get into the Cleveland Browns, who have had a super goofy start to their season and to their training camp. If you've missed it, first day wearing pads, Nick Chubb goes down from a tackle with Mack Wilson. Nick Chubb is now in concussion protocol as a result of that. Mack Wilson was getting dragged through the mud a little bit on Twitter after that, saying, dude, what are you doing? What a bad teammate. He tackled Nick Chubb. He's the golden goose. You know, we have to protect Nick Chubb at all costs. Mack, you're an idiot. You can't tackle. All right, let's lay off Mack Wilson a little bit, okay? Obviously, he's very outspoken on Twitter. His gets us meter is supposedly broken. You know, he gets us all the way. But, dude, this is a contact sport the last time that I checked. The last time that I checked, when these guys tie up their cleats and strap up their chins, on, in the next 3 weeks at First Energy Stadium, believe it or not, in first week of September to play the Baltimore Ravens, tackling is going to happen. There's no flags that these guys wear around their hips. It's a contact sport. Injuries happen. Nick Chubb is going to be okay. He's a tough cookie. And then the next day, Mack Wilson gets hurt in a super scary hyperextension of his knee situation. Still undetermined if he will need season-ending injury, which would be obviously tragic for the Browns because they are super light-handed at linebacker. And today the conversation stirs up of should the Cleveland Browns sign Clay Matthews? I'll ask you, should the Cleveland Browns sign Clay Matthews? Tweet the show at Pedone My Take. Tweet me at Nick Pedone 12. I think, personally, you should absolutely do it. Sign Clay Matthews. Why not? What do you lose if you sign Clay Matthews? Oh, well, Clay Matthews, he's 34. Isn't there a guy younger? Sure, probably. Has he done as much as Clay Matthews? Clay Matthews, to me, is the type of guy where he belongs here because of his dad, instant fan favorite. We get all of that. But to me, he's one of those guys where he's an old veteran that's, bounced around a few teams here at the end of his career. But the Browns will sit out and wait on it, and then another random team will pick him up, and he'll be really good for them. Now, and I know that he doesn't fill the interior linebacker role that Mack Wilson was supposed to fill. Obviously, big shoes left behind there from Joe Schobert. But Clay Matthews is still a quality linebacker. So I don't understand the argument against bringing him in. And Ken Carman from 92 Through the Fan had an outstanding tweet about people complaining about Clay and saying that, what do you mean Clay Matthews doesn't fit the Browns system? Can somebody show me what this system is? Because I've seen nothing but since 2010, 7 defensive coordinators walk in the door in Berea and walk themselves right out the way. I hear so much about the system. We heard about the system with Jannard Avery here in Cleveland. What system are you guys talking about? My system is you get good players, you put them on the field, and you let them make plays. And I know that sounds a hell of a lot similar to what Freddie Kitchens' offense looked like last year. But geez, why are we overthinking this? Do we really want Jacob Phillips and Grant Delpit, who are both rookies, running around there week 1 like chickens with their heads cut off every play as your starting linebackers in a division against the Ravens, who run the hell out of the ball? And they added J.K. Dobbins with, Joe Mixon with the Steelers, slew of backs. The Browns don't have what? And you're mad about trying to sign Clay Matthews? I'd go pick up Clay Matthews, get him on I-71, and take him to Berea myself. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Today, they also brought in 4 kickers, the Browns did. One being Cody Parkey, and we've tried that experiment before, so have the Chicago Bears. I like it. You bring in a camp kicker, you get Austin Seibert some rest. It's good for everybody. It puts a little bit of pressure on him, gets him making the kicks, especially because Jamie Gillen has dealt with the coronavirus stuff, and he was out today with another undisclosed illness. I get the desire to bring in another kicker, but let's start bringing in some more offensive guards and some more linebackers and some more defensive back help before we start kind of worrying about what's going on with the kickers. I mean, maybe that's me. The offense supposedly looks serviceable. Any offense in training camp, you're going to have your bad moments. You're going to have your good moments. Josina Anderson tweeted that a Brown source told her that old boy Odell Beckham Jr., when healthy, looks phenomenal. And I'm phenomenally excited about that, to see 13 back on the field and to see him healthy, because personally, I don't think we saw that last year. So, in the last 10 minutes, I wanted to get into a new segment that I definitely didn't think of just minutes before I went onto the air, and that's the play of the week. So, we're going to have a small play of the week where sports just kind of missed the mark, where people were kind of just off. We're going to have a medium take of the week where I can't decide if they were in the middle, if they were bad, if they were good, whatever, and we're going to have the big play of the week. Obviously, this show is hosted on bigplay.com. Big play of the week, a team or a person or player, coach, athlete that hit the mark and knocked it out of the park. So let's get into it. The play of the week on bigplay.com. Rolls right off the tongue. My small play of the week is baseball fans. I hate baseball sometimes, and I hate their fans even more, because this Fernando Tatis Jr. stuff is just absolutely ridiculous. Because to me, the baseball unwritten rules, if you want them to be followed, any unwritten rules, if you want them to be followed, just write them down. You know, what's the sense of having them unwritten when you could just write them down? Isn't that pretty simple logic? And then it got me thinking, like, well, let's look in the rule book. Well, the rule book says you could swing on a 3-0 pitch. And logic tells me if you think you could hit a home run, hit a home run. It's pretty freaking cool. It's also pretty hard to do. I don't know if anybody out there has ever tried to hit a home run, but it doesn't come easy, you know? My dad just can't roll off the couch and hit a home run, crack his back maybe a little, and just crank one out of the Padres Stadium or Texas, wherever they are at. It's hard. So before a couple days ago, I've never heard anything about this unwritten rule of not swinging when you're up so much. There's no mercy rule. If you think you could hit a homer, just hit it. And the old man's let's try that. The old heads that are mad about this, you're the reason that baseball is dying. And people love defending baseball. It's not dying. It's not dying. The viewership is up. It's just the attendance that's down. People do it a lot here in Cleveland. It's not fun because when you do this kind of stuff, home runs are the coolest part of the game. Dunks in basketball are the coolest part of the game, and threes. And touchdowns and interceptions are the coolest parts of football. So why are you trying to take away this kid's home run? It was freaking cool. It was fun. I don't know why his own manager, dragged him through the mud, saying it was unsportsmanship-like. This is Major League Baseball. There's no run rule. It's not T-ball in Independence, Ohio. It's not coach pitch at Nordonia High School. Why do you have to apologize? It was cool. Quit piling on him. So that's my take about that. That's the small play of the week. They missed the mark completely. Here's my medium play of the week. The NFLPA, this came out today, will not allow mascots or cheerleaders into the stadium for the 2020 season. I, for one, was taken aback. What is SJ and the Browns supposed to do? I'm not going to get to see SJ. He's the mascot. SJ, the dog that runs through the tunnel, the big leash tunnel. SJ runs through. He's an actual real-life dog. Is SJ a mascot, or is it just the big furry costumes that are mascots? Because I need to see SJ run through that thing, or I'm going to be really mad. Does this affect SJ's contract? Is SJ now an arbitration guy? I don't really understand how this works. And then we get into the conversation of no cheerleaders. What? No cheerleaders? Obviously, we haven't had that in Cleveland ever. How are creepy old men on Facebook supposed to have a profile picture or a cover photo on Twitter if there's no cheerleaders? That's the whole point, is they awkwardly stand there like this with the cheerleaders wrapped around them. That's one of my biggest pet peeves ever, and it's insanely creepy, and I hate it. But it's going to be weird, and that's my thing with college football, too, is the college football, to me, the bubble doesn't bother me in the NBA, and baseball doesn't bother me with the whole no fans thing. I think they've done a good job with the cardboard cutouts and the virtual fans. I think they've done a good job with pumping that noise in. It sounds really cool. It sounds really real, as if there were fans there, and it makes the experience at home watchable and enjoyable and what we're used to. But college football, man. When I think of college football, I talked about it with Ohio State and with the flyover shots of the stadium and the fans wrapped all around, wearing their red shirts. I think of college football. I think of the colors. I think of the bands. I think of the tailgates outside of the stadium. You see those close-up camera angles of a guy grilling a hot dog and drinking a beer, getting ready to go in, cheering his team on. He's got his paint stripes underneath his eyes. His hat, his neck beard is even spray painted, red and silver for the Buckeyes, maize and gold for that team up north. It's going to be weird with no cheerleaders, with no fans, with no colors, with no anything in college football. But as far as the NFL goes, I think it'll be okay because the NFL in and of itself in the game is such a production. Because college football, man, you have times where you're watching Ohio State play the University of Miami, Ohio in Oxford. And not Miami, Florida, Miami, Ohio in Oxford. And the Buckeyes are up 73-6. And some kid from St. Ignatius that walked onto Ohio State's team who just turned 18 the other day just rushed in for his fourth touchdown of the game because the game was over by halftime. the product that the NCAA puts on isn't always up to the NFL standards. So I do think the NFL will get by with no mascots, with no pyrotechnics, with no cheerleaders. I think the NFL would be fine, especially because the media will be there to hopefully do their job in telling the story and painting the picture that the fans should be able to see. And there's going to be some fans at some of these stadiums, possibly 25% in some of these stadiums. So it's time for my big play of the week before we get out of here. Sir Yacht. This guy put his Twitter cred, his TikTok cred on the line this week and saying that he has a rock solid source of an athletic director at a Power 5 school that is saying the Big Ten is undoubtedly back. That Kevin Warren made a mistake. He realized his mistake, and football in the Big Ten, football in Ohio will be back. Obviously, Sir Yacht has a ton of followers. If you're unfamiliar with his content, he posts a lot of funny Cleveland, Ohio type videos. He'll roast Jake Paul, who's a YouTuber from Ohio. He'll roast Freddie Kitchens back when he was the coach of the Browns. He's a Mike Polk Jr. type of character. And then he hits us with this concrete news that obviously impacts a lot of people's lives in different ways. Personally, as a fan and a media member, enjoyment and employment, and most people just enjoyment. Shout out to Sir Yacht, man. And obviously, Kevin over at the Big Ten puts out the statement today that they're concrete in their decision. Maybe try in the spring, but there's going to be no fall college football season, no college fall sports, period. Sir Yacht don't care. He said that's a smoke screen. Double down then, Sir Yacht. This guy's gotten noticed by Barstool. He's been on the Pat McAfee show. He's everywhere. He's blowing it up. He's risking his name, for this scoop that he supposedly has. And it will be funny. He says it's not. He swears up and down that it's not all just one gigantic troll, but it would be a little bit funny if he kind of ruffled all these people's feathers just because he's Sir Yacht, man. He's hilarious. He's funny. He loves what he does. But huge shout out to him. He's my big play of the week because he really put on his whole internet career on the line with this under his, at name Sir Yacht to do this phenomenal stuff. Thanks to everybody for hanging out with us on this episode of Pedone My Take. Another fun, outstanding hour, in my opinion, of course. Big thanks to Matt Babcock from Babcock Hoops. Awesome stuff about that NBA draft, which is happening on Thursday. So excited. Cavs are going to get that pick. It's going to be exciting. Go check out him at Babcock Hoops on Twitter at Matt Babcock 11. Super great stuff over there. Next Wednesday night, be on the lookout for the first annual Pedone My Take Fantasy Football Special. We're going to get you ready for your NFL Draft Fantasy Football season. It's going to be a whole lot of fun, who to take, who not to take. This has been another episode of Pedone My Take on BigPlay.com. Love y'all so much. Peace.